You're 62, Mom. You don't need a four-bedroom house anymore. Let's face it, you're just rattling around in here like an old ghost.
My son, Julian, didn't look at me as he spoke. Instead, he peeled a small, circular blue sticker off a sheet and slapped it onto the bottom of my antique mahogany dining table. "What are you doing, Julian?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's claiming the table," my daughter Avery chimed in from the hallway. She walked into the dining room holding a sheet of red stickers. She walked straight to my grandmother's silver cabinet and placed a red dot right on the glass. "Julian gets the dining set. I get the silver. It's only fair we decide this now before things get complicated." I stood in my own dining room, clutching a warm ceramic coffee mug just to keep my hands from shaking. My husband, Robert, had passed away only 6 months ago. Before I could find the words to stop them, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. It was an email notification from my estate attorney, Arthur Pendleton. "Margaret, I've reviewed the documents you requested. The final clause in your Robert's secondary will has been validated. If your children proceed with the probate contest on Friday, the automated disclosures will be released to the state court. If you want to hear more raw, emotional confessions from people who survived their family's deepest betrayals, take just 5 seconds to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell these untold stories." "Are you even listening to us, Mom?" Julian asked, crossing his arms. "We saw the draft of your new will on your desk last week. You're leaving 40% of the estate to some random charity called the Safe Haven Foundation. That's our inheritance. Dad worked 40 years to build his real estate business. You have no right to give his money away." "That money doesn't belong to you yet, Julian," I said softly, staring at the blue sticker on my table. "It should," Avery snapped, her eyes narrowing. "We did some digging, Mom. We talked to the accountant. There's over $3 million in the primary estate account. If you don't sign the voluntary executorship transfer by Friday, Julian and I are filing a petition to declare you mentally unfit to manage the estate." My heart stopped. I looked at my 2 children, the babies I had held, the teenagers I had stayed up late worrying about. They were looking at me not as a mother, but as a roadblock. "You would really do that?" I whispered, a tear escaping my eye. "We have to protect Dad's legacy," Julian said coldly, picking up his car keys. "We'll see you at the attorney's office on Friday morning. Have the papers signed, or we let the court decide." They walked out, leaving the front door wide open. The cold autumn wind rushed in, rustling the red and blue stickers scattered across my living room. I walked over to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Tucked beneath old tax returns was a worn black leather ledger. It was Robert's private journal from 2016. I opened it to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. "Julian's debt is paid. The company is safe, but the cost was astronomical. If the public ever finds out where the $1.5 million went, Julian will spend 10 years in federal prison. Margaret and I have agreed. The properties are heavily leveraged. There is no real estate empire, only the illusion of one." The next morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Arthur Pendleton, my attorney. Arthur said, his voice grave, "Your children's attorney just filed a formal demand for an expedited forensic audit of your late husband's commercial properties. They want to verify the valuation of the buildings before Friday's meeting." "Can we stop it, Arthur?" I asked, gripping the kitchen counter. "Legally, no," Arthur sighed. "As beneficiaries of the trust, they have the right to request an audit if they suspect mismanagement. Margaret, if they run those numbers, they are going to discover the giant liens on the downtown plaza. They will see that the buildings are practically worthless." They don't know why the liens are there, I whispered, my throat dry. Not yet, Arthur warned, but a forensic auditor will follow the money trail. They will see the $1.5 million wire transfer to a private account in the Cayman Islands back in 2016. They will trace it to the hush money settlement for Julian's embezzlement scheme at the construction firm. If that becomes public record during a court battle, the district attorney will have to investigate. I closed my eyes. My husband and I had sacrificed our entire retirement, mortgaging our commercial buildings to the hilt, just to keep our son from wearing a prison jumpsuit. We had kept the secret for 10 years, letting our children believe we were still multi-billionaires, so Julian could live his life without the shadow of his crime. And now his own greed was about to pull the thread that would unravel everything. Suddenly, another notification flashed on my phone. It was an alert from my home security system. The camera in the backyard had detected motion. I walked to the window and looked out. Avery was in my backyard, accompanied by a man in a safety vest holding a clipboard. They were measuring the distance from the property line to my patio. I threw open the back door. "Avery, what are you doing?" Avery turned, looking completely unbothered. "Oh, Mom, this is Marcus. He's a land surveyor. I'm just getting an appraisal on the lot. A developer offered me a great price to split the property and build 2 duplexes here once we sell the main house." "This is my home," I shouted, the anger finally bursting through my grief. "You still live here." "For now," Avery smiled thinly, checking her phone. "But let's be realistic. By Friday afternoon, you won't be making the decisions anymore. Julian and I have already signed the joint representation agreement." She walked away with the surveyor, leaving me standing on the cold grass. But as I turned to go back inside, I noticed a small white envelope slipped under my back doormat. There was no stamp, no return address, just my name written in shaky, unfamiliar handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table and tore the envelope open. Inside was a single index card and an old, faded photograph. The photograph showed my husband, Robert, standing next to a young man in a mechanic's uniform. I recognized the young man instantly. It was Leo Harris, the head accountant at Robert's firm back in 2016. When the $1.5 million went missing from the company accounts, Leo had been accused of the theft. He had been fired in disgrace, his career ruined, though no criminal charges were ever filed because Robert had declined to prosecute. I turned the index card over. The message was short and chilling. "Mrs. Vance, your children think they are auditing a fortune. They don't know that I have the original database logs from 2016. I know who actually took the money. If Julian forces this audit on Friday, I am taking my evidence to the police. I've waited 10 years for justice. Tell your son to back down, or we all go down together." My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Julian. "Just received the preliminary audit authorization. We're going to find out where you've been hiding Dad's millions, Mom. See you Friday." I stared at the text, then at Leo's photograph. Julian was blindly walking into his own execution, completely unaware that his sister's greed and his own arrogance were about to destroy him. I knew I had to make a choice. I could keep playing the protective mother, begging them to stop, letting them call me incompetent and greedy, or I could step aside and let the avalanche they started crush them. I picked up the landline and dialed Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur," I said, my voice cold and steady, "do not block the audit. Let them file the papers and call Leo Harris. Tell him I want him to attend the meeting on Friday morning." "Margaret," Arthur sounded stunned. "If Leo shows up with those logs, Julian will be arrested. You're his mother. Are you sure about this?" I've spent 10 years protecting a thief who now wants to declare me mentally unfit just to steal what little I have left. I am done sacrificing my life for children who have no soul." Friday morning was gray and rainy. The conference room at Pendleton and Associates was silent, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Julian and Avery sat on one side of the long glass table, flanked by their high-priced attorney, a sharp-faced man named Donald Vance. They looked victorious. Julian was already wearing a brand-new designer watch, and Avery had a smirk plastered across her face. I sat on the other side of the table with Arthur. "Well, Mrs. Vance," Donald Vance said, sliding a thick stack of papers across the table, "our forensic team has completed the preliminary review of the commercial properties. We found some highly disturbing anomalies. Every single property in the family trust has a secondary lien of over $500,000. The liquid accounts are practically dry. We are here to demand a full explanation of where your husband's fortune went." "I told you," I said softly, looking at my son. "There is no fortune left, Julian." "Don't lie to us, Mom," Julian snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Dad was pulling in millions. You've locked the funds away in some offshore account to keep it for yourself. We have the right to petition the court for full conservatorship of your assets today." "Actually, you don't," Arthur Pendleton spoke up, opening his briefcase, "because the trust was never funded by Robert's primary assets. Those properties were leveraged to pay off a private corporate liability in 2016. "What liability?" Avery laughed scoffingly. "Dad's business was flawless." "It wasn't Dad's liability," I said, looking directly at Julian. "It was yours." The door to the conference room opened. Julian turned his head, his smirk instantly freezing as Leo Harris walked into the room. Leo was older now, his face lined with stress, but he held a thick manila folder in his hands. "What is he doing here?" Julian gasped, his face turning a sickly shade of white. "Mom, what is this?" "Mr. Harris is here as a hostile witness," Arthur Pendleton explained calmly. 10 years ago, Julian, you embezzled $1.5 million from your father's firm to cover your gambling debts. You framed Leo. To save you from prison, your father and Margaret secretly paid a $1.5 million restitution settlement to Leo and the corporate board, funded entirely by mortgaging the family properties. That is where the inheritance went. "This is a lie," Avery screamed, turning to her brother. "Julian, tell her she's lying. Dad had millions." Julian couldn't speak. He stared at Leo Harris, who walked over and dropped the thick manila folder right in front of Julian's attorney. "Those are the original server logs from 2016, Mr. Vance," Leo said, his voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. "They show Julian's personal IP address routing the corporate funds into his private account. Your client didn't just embezzle, he committed wire fraud. I've kept these logs for 10 years because Robert begged me not to destroy his son's life. But since Julian is now accusing his own mother of fraud, I think it's time the district attorney had a look." Donald Vance, the children's attorney, opened the folder. He scanned the database logs for less than 30 seconds before slowly closing the file. He looked at Julian, then at Avery, and finally stood up. "What are you doing?" Avery panicked, grabbing her attorney's sleeve. "Fix this." "There is nothing to fix, Avery," Donald Vance said, adjusting his tie. "This evidence is entered into the public record during a conservatorship hearing. Your brother will be indicted by the end of the day. My representation of your interests is officially terminated. Good day." He walked out of the room, leaving the door swinging behind him. The silence in the room was absolute. Avery looked at the folder, then at Julian, who had buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking as he began to cry. "Mom," Avery whispered, her voice suddenly small, devoid of all its previous malice. We didn't know. Why didn't you just tell us?" "Because your father and I wanted you to love your brother," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. "We wanted you to have a normal family, and in return, you came into my home and put stickers on my furniture while I was still mourning my husband." "Mom, please," Julian sobbed, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "If Leo goes to the police, my career is over. My life is over. You have to stop him." "I don't have to do anything anymore, Julian," I said, standing up from the table. "The safety net is gone." I didn't stop Leo from going to the authorities, but because the original embezzlement occurred 10 years ago, the statute of limitations protected Julian from immediate federal prosecution. However, the exposure of the logs destroyed his career. He was forced to resign from his executive position in disgrace, and his professional license was permanently revoked. Avery's rich fiancé called off her wedding 3 weeks later when the rumors of the family scandal leaked into our small town. She was forced to sell her luxury car just to pay off her shared legal debts. I sold the suburban house, not because I had to, but because I wanted a fresh start. I used my late husband's small private pension, which was completely separate from the business trust, to buy a beautiful sunlit cottage near the mountains. I left the red and blue stickers on the furniture when the movers came. I didn't want any of it. Yesterday, I signed my final will and testament in Arthur Pendleton's office. There are no red or blue stickers on my new possessions. 50% of my remaining assets are going to the Safe Haven Foundation, a local shelter for abused women. The other 50% is locked in a strict educational trust for Julian's young children, completely insulated from their father's reach. Sometimes, when the evenings are quiet, I sit on my new porch holding a warm cup of tea and look out at the mountains. I still feel a deep, lingering ache when I think of the children I raised. But as the sun sets behind the peaks, casting a beautiful orange glow over the valley, I don't feel anger. I realized that the greatest inheritance I could ever leave them wasn't money. It was the truth. And for the first time in my 62 years, I am finally free.